All right, hello, and welcome to this MDM webcast, which we have titled Winning the Next Generation, How Distributors Can Connect, Sell, and Grow with Tomorrow's Buyers, and it's sponsored by TradeHounds. I'm Mike Hockett. I'm the executive editor of Modern Distribution Management and our website, mdm.com, and I want to thank you for participating in this event. I'm going to serve as your moderator for this program, which is being recorded. And shortly following this webcast, we will send all registrants an on-demand link, which you can then use to watch again or share however you would like. The vast majority of this hour is going to be a panel discussion on the topic of adapting to today's distributor buyer expectations so that you can meet and ideally exceed those expectations. While tariffs have no doubt dominated discussions in 2025, we know that evolving buyer expectations have been top of mind for distributors for years. It's been a top issue ever since e-commerce really began to proliferate in this industry in the 2010s and became supercharged in this post-pandemic era. A big part of that acceleration in expectations is due to a generational shift. My millennial generation has been buying on Amazon for most of our adulthood, and that leads to the expectation of the same neat and tidy commerce experience for B2B purchases. LinkedIn's 2025 B2B buyer report found that millennials now comprise 73% of all B2B buyers and 44% of final purchasing decision makers. So their expectations are now the norm. And you can certainly say the same thing about Gen Z. They've only known a world that involves streamlined digital buying experiences. So we're here today to discuss this generational shift and how to find, engage, and sell to these emerging decision makers using a modern omni-channel approach. We're going to examine how to future-proof your sales strategy, build lasting relationships with next-gen customers, and position your business for sustained growth and profitability. And to do so, we've recruited an excellent panel of guest speakers to share their expertise, insight, and wisdom. With me here, in no particular order, are Victor Corrales, who is Director of Marketing and Internal Business Development at Siemens Electrical Products. We have Ali Hasham, who founded advisory firm Revenue Optics after long serving as a sales and business development executive for several major industrial distributors. And we have David Botters, who is CEO of TradeHounds as well as Sparks IQ. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
Nice to join you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, I'm going to have each of you introduce yourself in just a bit after I give a bit of housekeeping. First, we love to get our audience involved in these webcasts, so if you're watching this live, you are more than welcome to join the discussion by submitting a question or a comment at any time via the Q&A function. We'll do our best to either answer any questions as we make our way through some planned talking points, or we might save a few for a dedicated Q&A session towards the end. But definitely don't feel like you need to wait until a particular moment in this hour to ask something. Secondly, I want to give a quick plug for MDM's brand new 2025 Economic Outlook Report, which went live yesterday in the MDM store and on our premium dashboard. This is a robust 115-page report full of economic data specific to the U.S. wholesale distribution sector, with more specific data broken out for each of its 19 different product sectors as identified by the U.S. Census Bureau. This report contains our forecast for the broader industry and each sector's revenue outlook for 2025's third and fourth quarter, and then an annual revenue forecast for 2026. Plus, it has stats on employment, inventories, gross margin, reported versus real revenues, and a whole lot more, again, for each of these 19 different product sectors. It's in the store right now for $1,995. But MDM Premium subscribers get it as part of their subscription, which is only $850. So this means that your annual subscription includes that nearly $2,000 value of this giant report, plus all of our other exclusive research and articles throughout the year, making being a premium subscriber kind of a no-brainer. You can preview that report at the link here on the screen. All right, with all of that out of the way, let's meet our panelists. Victor, can you lead us off with a quick bio?
Sure, Mike, thank you. Hello, Victor Corrales again. I work at Siemens Electrical Products here in North America. I am Director of Marketing and International Business Development. been in the industry for over 20 years, right? All of them within Siemens. And I've seen the industry just go through an evolution, and recently even more the last few years. So we're excited about this conversation we're going to have.
Let's go over to Ali.
Ali Asham, founder of Revenue Optics, where we help distributors build out proactive inside sales machines that unlock growth with their small to medium accounts. Prior to launching my firm, I served as VP of Sales Excellence at Motion. Part of that, held leadership roles over at TruckPro and Wesco, building out their sales teams, and obviously super excited to be part of the panel for this important conversation.
And last but certainly not least, David.
Hey, I'm David Bowders. I'm the CEO of TradeHounds as well as Sparks IQ. I've been in the industry for over 30 years in industrial B2B and working with manufacturers, distributors, contractors, all of those parties basically to help them accelerate revenue and growth. And Sparks IQ is the parent company of TradeHounds, which we'll be talking quite a bit about today, and glad to be here.
All right, so let's dive in here. David, I would love to have you set the stage for us and explain the what that industrial distributors and manufacturers are dealing with in terms of buyer expectations. And I know that you have some slides prepped, so I have that first one queued up here.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Basically, what we're talking about is this is a typical pattern of how the layers work within the ecosystem across industrial B2B. Obviously, the folks on the call are very familiar with kind of the left of center part of it, manufacturers working through two-step go-to-market with their distributors to reach their customers, but there are layers well below that, and those layers get increasingly opaque for a lot of companies in the ecosystem. So we have the technicians who are actually at the street level or in the factory level who are originating requests for materials, and this is really kind of the invisible layer for a lot of companies, but about half of material purchases in industrial B2B originate at that field technician level. And then for those technicians who are working for smaller companies and or have their own business management function, they also connect to end customers. And those end customers could be residential homeowners, they could be plant facilities managers. There's a whole spectrum of those end users. So really the challenge for folks across the ecosystem is how to build awareness, preference, and revenue at these different levels in order to create pull for their products and services. So the TradeHounds app, just to give you a little bit of background on that, and this webinar is not about TradeHounds, but just to understand, how social, this is the new generation of Gen Zers, is the TikTok generation. These are folks who live and gather information in social media. And social media, generally speaking, is not very efficient for folks who have very specific interests. So TradeHounds is a focused community across industrial B2B that is now adding commerce capabilities to be able to serve those buyers more effectively. But basically, you can think of it as a mashup of TikTok and Instagram in terms of content that helps to connect and build awareness and preference with that new generation. So today we have about 425,000 of these users across a pretty broad diversity of verticals. The vast majority of them are either millennials or very heavily Gen Z. And that's really the appeal, I think, to manufacturers and distributors who are now working with TradeHounds to build awareness, preference, and revenue. So they have a lot of spending power, these 425,000 folks, and not only is it growing quickly, but they are very much a digital generation. I always say these are folks who don't want to call their parents, let alone their supply house. And so the amount of influence that they have in spending now is growing very quickly. In fact, our latest data are showing this well over $30 billion in terms of direct and indirect spend capability. In terms of the vertical mix, one of the things that makes TradeHounds interesting is how elastic the TradeHounds name is. TradeHounds doesn't point specifically to one vertical, and so you can see here, very heavily concentrated in MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. We also have a very strong position in industrial, which we'll talk about in a little bit. You can see the mix of our users. They cut across company size. I don't think we have a chart in here on that about 20 to 25% of them work for companies with over 100 employees. So these are not just, mom and pop type users. They also work as frontline decision makers at larger contractors and factories as well. One of the things we know about our customer base at TradeHounds is that they're very active as users in visiting supply houses. This really reinforces their purchasing influence and authority. They're out there all the time, and this is a group that's heavily involved in materials purchasing. Unfortunately for distributors, this is kind of what I call the trail of tears problem around e-commerce in distribution. Their level of satisfaction with distributor e-commerce sites is poor, and this has not changed significantly over the years, and I think is one of the key reasons why most distributors struggle to break single digits with their e-commerce adoption. Another reason that they've told us over and over again is that they typically buy from between 3 and 7 different distributors, and they don't want to have 3 to 7 different logins, passwords, navigation experiences, and quality levels when they shop. So sort of how Amazon has simplified the purchasing experience with their reseller marketplace, they're looking for simplicity of navigation and quality of tools as they go through this journey. So our users are definitely gaining information about brands, about their suppliers, about the products they use from social, and in particular, they have a strong affinity for peer-shared content, peer-produced content within the app. That's some of their most trusted content and how it influences their choice of who to do business with. And lastly, for now, about 3/4 of them, as I alluded to earlier, are involved in purchasing. One of the striking facts about both factory as well as construction is the poor capability to actually plan for purchases. So there's a very high percentage of the material that gets demanded that's needed in less than 48 hours typically, and typically has rush orders associated with it, making it these frontline folks on the app heavily influential in terms of what gets pulled through in the channel. And we can switch back to our conversation now.
Yeah, so let's unpack all this. David, I think that did a great job of setting the stage of what we're dealing with here and what distributors, what manufacturers are dealing with here in terms of, it's no secret that we're in the midst of this big seismic demographic shift of industrial buyers. I mentioned in my intro about how millennials now comprise the vast majority of these buyers, and that has brought these expectations of a sleek, consistent, streamlined, and particularly digital-first commerce experience. So I'd like to get each of your perspectives on what this has looked like and just how big of a challenge it's presented to distributors and manufacturers, most of which are probably finding it very challenging to keep up with this pace of transition. Ollie, if you don't mind starting here, just sharing some thoughts on what are you seeing out there in terms of how the industry is doing, reacting to this transition of buyer expectations, and just what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, absolutely. But before I answer, I gotta give David a shout out. His ability to see trends within this industry obviously is huge. He's spotting trends that I think will define distribution 5 years out. I mean, that's the kind of vision that really sets true leaders apart, and it's going to shape kind of what the distribution business will look like in the future. So as far as a shift, I think it's the single biggest disruptor I've seen in the 20 plus years I've been within distribution. If you think about the old world, buyers were relationship based. They were patient. They would wait on a call from a rep or a branch counter response. But today's buyers, they're digital savvy. I mean, they grew up with Amazon in their pocket. They expect speed, transparency, and frictionless engagement. They don't do a good job of separating out their B2C from their B2B anymore. They want the same convenience and the same expertise. And I would say the challenge for distributors is that our commercial models weren't built for that pace. Field sellers are still deployed like it's 2005. Inside sales within most businesses within distribution are still reactive, and digital is still being treated as a side project versus a core initiative. And the gap between buyer expectations and distributor execution is widening, and it's really where competitors are stealing share. So my opinion is the shift isn't coming; it's here. And I would say without human-led omnichannel without that human-led omnichannel machine, you're not just losing sales; you're hemorrhaging profit into your competitors' P&L. So it's here.
Over to Victor. Any follow-up here as the manufacturer, representative here on this panel?
Yeah. So yeah, Ali said it correctly, right? We talked for so long about the generational shift that was coming, and it's finally here. Like we're living it. It's here. There's a challenge for us manufacturers and our distributors to make sure that we effectively engage this new generation, right? Not only on the purchasing side, but I will also say on the educational side. And how do you do your research, and how do you get to the point before making an actual purchase, making sure that we are hitting them at every purchase, every step of that journey before the purchase, right? So it's definitely a challenge, but I think we have made long strides in the last few years, and we'll talk more about that throughout this conversation.
David, any just broad follow-up thoughts there?
Yeah, I think one of the things Victor was alluding to is what we call the knowledge transfer problem. So we do have up to half of the skilled tradespeople retiring in the next 5 to 10 years. That part's pretty much non-negotiable. Their backs and knees are wearing out, which is kind of the non-negotiable constraint in the whole problem. But more importantly, the knowledge is at risk of going away. And that means there's going to be a lot of work slowdowns. There's going to be productivity issues. And fundamentally, unless we start finding new ways of transferring knowledge, and we think social and peer-based content is an important lever there, we're going to have some major issues in the skilled trades in terms of productivity and ultimately profitability.
Well, it's almost impossible to have a buyer expectations or habits conversation without mentioning the Amazon effect, which of course pertains to how Amazon is seen as the gold standard by many buyers, and not just young ones, but for the way that they expect e-commerce to look and function. We know that Amazon is a direct competitor to distributors in many ways and continues to gain more market share in the B2B space. So it's an interesting dynamic there. And Victor, I'd like to start with you here and just getting your thoughts on how Amazon, even with all the other marketplaces that have sprouted up over the years, continues to be seen as that standard, and just what impact that has had on the experience that today's buyers expect and that distributors and manufacturers now try to offer.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think Amazon set the standard and set the bar of how an e-commerce transaction should look like and feel like, with regards to just the effectiveness, and the ease of doing the transaction. So for our distributors, the challenge is how do you match that level of ease of doing that transaction, right? But I think also distributors have to make sure that they have the ability to place a compelling argument of what is the value add that they provide, right? That it's outside of just a transaction via an e-commerce, right? So distributors bring the technical expertise, the project management, field resolution, inventory allocation, so it's a little bit of differentiative sale, right? So the transaction, it's one piece, but then what follows that transaction is also something that a distributor should be able to elaborate and bring that value add service that ideally becomes more important than the product itself, right? As a distributor. So there's a fit and a need for all these entities and personas in the market. But Amazon definitely represents a challenge, and now it forces manufacturers and distributors to be better at elaborating that value add proposition that they bring to the buyers, right?
Yeah. Over to Ali, just thoughts on the Amazon effect here.
Yeah, I think Victor nailed it. I mean, the biggest differentiator from a distribution standpoint is the technical expertise, and that's really what's going to be the big separator in the future. Is you combine that speed of response, the digital platform, and then you combine that with the expertise that our sellers have within distribution. That's what's going to really create the future of what this looks like in the next 5 or 10 years. So it's technical expertise for sure, putting all that stuff together.
David, your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think it's the frictionlessness experience combined with the ability to deal with complexity. If you're not in complex part of B2B, I think Amazon is probably going to eat your lunch. There's just not enough leverage there for folks to be able to overcome that. So really the defining question is, what is your value add on top of the usual, having the right stuff at the right place at the right time at the right price?
And then we did get our first audience question here, and they ask, I'm going to actually show this one live here so I think everyone can see it. But they're basically asking if you're a manufacturer that only sells through distribution and you want to expand your e-commerce presence, should they consider selling direct to the customer? And how do they do that while maintaining the relationship with the distributor? Given that, once you sell direct, you're kind of bypassing your distributor partner there. So it can be a touchy subject there, but is that something that anyone on our panel wants to share some thoughts on?
I think number one is you have to develop your channel strategy first. So, we're not the right place for you to sort out how you sell to your customers. But for companies that are wrestling with that, I mean, it's going to take some tough conversations about what is the value add of distribution. And let's be honest, most manufacturers have found it very, very difficult to sell direct to their end customers. And just framing it through the lens of trade hounds, we can see why, because our customers don't want to split their orders across tons and tons of different suppliers. And one of the roles of distributors is to be able to aggregate and to be able to add value across suppliers. So unless you have a category that stands really well on its own, like tools comes to mind, a lot of people separate their tools from their materials purchasing. It's going to be pretty hard for you to win that race. But number one, figure out where you want to be and what the role is of your distributors.
That's great. Ali or Victor, any follow-up thoughts there?
I think from my side, I think David covered pretty well.
Yeah, David hit it really well.
Awesome. All right. Well, David, I'm going to pitch back to you here with, I know you have a few more slides to get through. Give me 1 second. And yeah, I think we're good here. So I think what we just covered was the what of this situation. So now we want to dive into the why. So David, yeah, continuing with you here, can you dive into explaining why stakeholders in B2B supply are prioritizing adapting to these changing buyer habits? And I think we're starting with this slide, if I have it right.
That's right. So there's a lot of technological and social convergence here that you can't really untangle them, because the buyer expectation now, particularly as generative AI and agentic AI are seeping into everyday life. Our trade hounds users are already using agentic AI to be able to solve important problems that they have to resolve. So, we've incorporated AI into product search and product sourcing, which is super important to our users. They don't want to be doing Google searches and tapping over to distributor websites. Being able to make sure that catalogs are integrated into the app and that it's leveraging the best of new AI technology is super important. And as you think about this, what this does for manufacturers and distributors, it raises the importance of having quality catalogs, quality product data, having really understanding their customers and how they look for information and discover their products, and making sure that they're optimized for that type of a search experience. One of the real places where it all comes to a head is in the sourcing maps that we put into the app. So after a user has identified which products they need, either by taking a picture of it, speaking it, or browsing a catalog, we show them the in-stock availability across the area that they're in. So distributors need to make sure that they've activated their branches, that they've started to put in their hours of operations, their line cards. The best of them will be doing API integration so that they can give real-time availability. As I mentioned before, most of the skilled trades are terrible at forecasting. And so they're constantly in a crunch of trying to get stuff quickly. And if they can't see you, then you're kind of out of the picture from a buyer's perspective. Some of the other baby steps that distributors are taking quickly alongside manufacturers is making sure they set up their company accounts. So we've been working with Siemens and lots of distributors across the ecosystem, other manufacturers, to make sure that we're showcasing their products. They can do new product launches. They can announce branch openings, that sort of thing, to be able to really connect and sell ultimately to this new generation. But you got to be visible on these platforms, and whether it's trade hounds or, there are other platforms that you can go to. Some of our clients are also cross-listing on Instagram and TikTok, and you want to be wherever your customers are. And I think that's really the important thing to keep in mind. New product launches for both manufacturers as well as their channel partners is super important. We alluded earlier to the knowledge transfer issue. that's a broad knowledge transfer issue, not just new products, but there's a huge amount of innovation now, particularly in the electrical space and industrial spaces around energy efficiency, resiliency, all of that. Every time there's a new product launch, you think about the money that's being spent by manufacturers and their channel partners to get this to launch. Without awareness and preference downstream, it's all for naught. So really understanding, going back to that industry map I shared earlier, how does this have to play out? That's really one of the values of the platform, is building awareness and ultimately revenue.
David, we did just get a question that asked, someone says we manufacture equipment that is rented. Does TradeHounds have features that allow rental products to be listed?
Yeah, that's a particular interest for us. So obviously we can set up company accounts, we can list line cards, all of that great stuff. We see equipment rentals, the typical construction equipment, aerial lifts, all that good stuff is a sweet spot, particularly as it cuts across the entire user base and not just, the smaller subsegments that we talked about.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Moving on.
So some of the other things that we talked about all the folks who are leaving the workforce. There's a big movement in MEP and industrial now to recruit new talent, and a lot of brands that we work with are actually starting to work their way into awareness through talent development and really recruiting workers into the skilled trades. And so we can create campaigns that help brands to really operationalize that and to be able to reach large populations of interested technicians. So much of the way that this new generation forms their opinions about their suppliers, whether it's manufacturers or distributors, or for that matter, contractors, as they try to hire these workers, comes down to really the way that people learn from their peers. There's no amount of corporate produced content that can move the needle here. These folks generally, I would say, are skeptical of corporate produced content. And so when you have this type of a challenge, you really have to think through, how do we enable influencers or real users to create UGC, user-generated content that validates our brand and communicates the value story. When you try to do that directly, it doesn't work very well with this generation. I think we had a question about using TradeHounds to advertise repair for industrial valves or air compressors. It is an open platform, so broadly speaking, any product category that would be of interest, you can feel free to set up your company account, start to onboard your line card, your product families, and then we'll find a way to get that in. Most importantly, you need to be discoverable on the app. The AI search capabilities will quickly surface those needs, but you have to be discoverable. You can see these are just, some of the comments. Mining the brand sentiment is super important, being able to look across hundreds of thousands of users. What do they think about your products? What are they struggling with? We even have cases where people talking about what do they wish companies would do that they're not doing. Just being able to have this kind of social listening is really valuable to understand how to align your value proposition with the marketplace and really how to continuously improve your position. And I mentioned the importance of UGC. This is probably one of the biggest. User-generated content is one of the most important shifts from a marketing perspective that manufacturers and distributors have to come to terms with. In the old world, you'd have companies that would set up a Pete and Joe type of video series where they'd show how to use their products, and that type of controlled, or what I call contrived content, now is largely ignored in these types of threads. So it's really a reorchestration of content strategy around users and how to do that effectively. That's one of the pivot points, I would say, for everybody who's trying to succeed here. And one of the things that is, frankly fantastic, and one of the reasons Sparks IQ got involved with TradeHounds was the ability to do user research. So now anytime one of our distributor partners has questions about their customer base, we can do flash polls. We can actually get research for them at scale. And because of the user demographics as to which trades they're in, what types of projects they do, how long they've been in the trades, we're able to give them much more micro segmented user research around their customer base. And as we all know, whether it's pricing strategy or sales strategy, knowing your customers and their buyer journey is so important. And it's great to be able to really dig deep into why buyers buy from them. And of course, there's a lot of distributors now are starting to promote these types of platforms to their customer base. There are a lot of important insights that we can get as we have distributors sponsoring their customer base to onboard. We can start to give them advanced customer demographic information, help them to understand macro level pricing, sales share of wallet, customer churn, a whole bunch of those analytical type issues. As they onboard customers, we give them much deeper anonymized views of customer behavior. And actually, one of the most fun parts for me in this whole journey has been around memes. So at Trade Hounds, we actually have a meme scientist, I call her. She's, I think, 23 years old, and basically her job is to create memes that go viral. And in the case of Siemens, we did one that was, I think Siemens was kind of struggling to crack the 100,000 mark, and she was getting them deep into the millions. And it just came from this relatively simple idea of how do you start to use novel approaches to building awareness and preference. And this is just one of those things. If your marketing strategy hasn't thought about memes, you're probably missing a zero on some of your awareness building.
That's awesome.
And really, it comes down to how do you build awareness across all of the channels that your customers are in. And one of the things we work with brands like Siemens or other distributors on is creating user-generated content and then allowing them to deploy that across their other media platforms. So a lot of our content gets created in Trade Hounds and then gets leveraged into Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok. And that omni-channel approach and making sure you're everywhere your customers are, I think, and making sure it's authentic UGC is one of the keys to success here. So hopefully that gives you a good overview of how companies are starting to meet their customers where they are and to make sense of this new landscape.
I know we have a QR code here, but so I think next here is, again, unpacking a lot of what you just talked through, David, here. And first, as I drop down the slides here, we want to dive into the role of AI. And kind of any technology discussion usually centers around AI now. You mentioned that AI is infused into Trade Hounds, but AI is now impacting virtually every facet of operations for distributors and manufacturers, but especially so for those self-service tools like chatbots when you get into guided or recommended selling. So I guess starting here with David, I'm curious to get your thoughts on AI's broader role as hopefully a friend or a tool for distributors to better meet their buyer expectations, but also perhaps the challenge it poses to get right. And then as another layer, just how perfect does data have to be for distributors or manufacturers to start applying AI onto it?
Well, maybe I'll start backwards. The data part of it, one of the nice things about AI is how it does not require as high a level of standardization as previous technologies have. So companies today can have different data in different formats, and AI can make sense of commonalities and start to harmonize things in ways that previously were kind of deal breakers. In terms of where it's leading, I think what we're seeing at Trade Hounds is an increasing orchestration of chaos, is what we call it. So there, you think about historically all the friction that was built into the discovery process where you learn about products, then you have to go to a different place to request the products, and then it goes across the fence to another party whose job it is to answer whether it's in stock or available. I mean, the amount of friction that exists in that process is very costly to the economy. It leads to substandard returns for contractors, for manufacturers, for distributors. So a big part of AI is really reorchestrating these types of activities in streamlined, automated, and simplified ways, allowing all of the parties to focus on the parts of the problem that only humans can solve. It's the things that are ambiguous, new, complex, or risky. Those are the criteria that define where people should be spending time, and really automating out and streamlining out those other activities, lower value activities.
Same thing over to you, Ali. Just how are you seeing AI's role evolve here alongside everything that distributors have to pay attention to?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no question that AI is a force multiplier, but it's only as strong as the system you put into it. So I would say early in my career, I saw limits of, I'll say, patchwork CRMs, which was garbage in, garbage out. In my last organization, we piloted AI-guided next action engines, and I would say the reps that leaned into that really increased their coverage capacity versus those who didn't. So the reality is, you don't have to have perfect data. You need to have data that's good enough, and you've got to have some governance that goes alongside with that. So I would say focus on clean contacts, SKUs, segments, and then really apply AI in recommendation mode versus autopilot mode. And I would say, last but not least, AI will not replace sellers, but sellers that are not using AI, right, will replace sellers who don't. So that's the big takeaway there. Is it's a adder, if you will, or to be able to enable a lot more success going forward.
That's great. Victor, your thoughts on the role of AI in all this?
Yeah, so just echoing some of the comments from David and Ali, I think we need to use AI for improving and harmonizing that customer journey, right? Making it easier for them to not only be efficient in the educational piece and how do you go from an opportunity to actually something that is tangible that you can go buy, right? So that journey we need to work and use AI to make it more productive and effective. But also we have to make sure that it's accurate, right? I mean, electricity is no joke, right? And we need to make sure that the answers that this AI genies or engines are giving the user are accurate, right? So in Siemens, we created a platform called Numa that allows our sales and customers to go through that journey using AI, but making sure that they're getting accurate responses that match code and match the products that need to go through that opportunity before you make your purchase decision, right? But actually make an educated one with the use of AI, and actually a lot faster.
I would like to tag on to what Ali said for just a minute. I think one of the more interesting developments. So we started allowing for salespeople to start onboarding onto TradeHounds, having associate user accounts, and that gives them some restricted privileges. They can't just go on there and say, buy from me, buy from me, buy from me. But being able to start really seeing what's going on with their customers, seeing the dialogues around product, around pain points in the industry, and increasingly auto-connecting them directly to those users that they onboard into the app. And so there is in-app messaging, and this sort of goes back, I would call it hopefully a better version of the social selling phenomenon that we saw in the 2010s, is going to be an important part of the modern seller's toolkit, is how they engage on social platforms in a more responsible way.
That's great. Well, amid all of this tech infusion, whether it's AI or just other tech stack tools, I think it is important not to overlook the role of an actual salesperson or sales teams, which have always been what drives distributors as selling organizations. It's so easy to get caught up in the AI conversation and assume that it's going to replace that human sales element, but I really don't see that happening. What we've seen so far is, like you said, Ali, much more about augmenting and assisting salespeople, giving them more tools, more information, and offloading those lower value tasks so they can focus on bigger priorities, like you said, David. So I guess continuing here, Ali, with you, as someone who has led sales teams at very large distributors, I'd love to get your take on that role of the salesperson amid all of this tech infusion and how you've seen it evolve over your time there, whether it's through Wesco, Truck Pro, Motion, or now with your own unit.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen sales teams through 20 years, and the one thing I've learned is the role of the seller hasn't gone away. It's been elevated. If you think about the old school approach, territory ownership was gospel. We sent out highly comped field reps into every account, whether it was a $10,000 a year account or an account that did $1 million. The field reps were expected to be superheroes to cover everything everywhere. Sales was relationship first, so it was phone calls, golf outings, handshakes. And the truth is, nobody really measured cycle time or cost to serve or the coverage of some of these small to medium-sized accounts. And inefficiency, in my opinion, was invisible, but I believe margins masked it. And you saw the inflection point really with the pandemic and that disruption, because that obviously generated more of a buyer shift. Buyers went digital first. They wanted transparency, speed, self-service. But at the same time, the small to medium-sized account base, white space, pretty much was untouched. It was too small for field reps, too messy for branches, and then inside sales, in my opinion, was trapped into this order taking purgatory instead of really being able to drive proactive demand. If you fast forward to today's model, it's got to be omnichannel by design. Field reps have got to cover and anchor complex deals. The inside sales teams have got to cover small to medium-sized accounts in that long tail, and digital has got to be that glue. Inside sales has got to run like a machine. Again, cadence driven, AI guided with next best actions. Ultimately, ROI is a scoreboard, right? Are you seeing an uplift with profit dollars? Are you seeing a change in cycle time compression? And you also got to look at cost to serve as a weapon. So again, in the old world, sellers were gatekeepers of information. In the new world, buyers often know as much as the seller before the first contact. So that means the role of the salesperson has shifted. Their job is to really be able to operate above the algorithm and to be able to bring judgment and trust and solution design to deals that are ambiguous, complex, or risky. So to me, sellers don't disappear in this model. They become the differentiator in every place the algorithm, can't earn trust.
I would say good sales reps continue. The lazy or the the inattentive ones, I think, are going to get killed.
And I think you alluded to this kind of evolving role of the salesperson as a consultant, within their company. That they're not just selling products or services. They are really taking this consultative approach of where they are solution providers, they are problem solvers, and not just someone selling an item. So I think that's just amid the rise of value-added services for distributors to differentiate themselves. I think that's just where we're seeing this morph to, is this consultative approach. David, same over to you. Just your thoughts on the role of the human salesperson in all this.
Well, I think it starts with a perspective shift, really moving past the trivial and moving into having business acumen, for example. Do you understand how your customer makes money? Do you understand how your company's products and services impact your customers' profitability and success? And that's not something a lot of sellers have been trained in. All of the buyer research shows that this is one of the biggest pain points that buyers operate with, which is they believe their sellers don't actually know or care about what's important to them. The sellers are very selfish and seller-centric. One of the things at the Sparks IQ side that we've done is to create a suite of modern sales training programs that build this business acumen. And I think it's going to take a reframing of the seller's job and in many ways a reconsideration of what kinds of people do we want in those roles. In the past, it was very transactional. I think it's going to have to become much deeper and more consultative, as you said.
Victor, same thing. Any follow-up here on how you're seeing the human element evolve here for salespeople?
I think both David and Ali had hit the nail on the head. I mean, the consultative selling and specialist type selling, that's where it's going to be.
Yeah. Well, I want to touch on this concept of data sharing, because over the years, I've always heard how manufacturers tend to be pretty protective of their data and aren't big on sharing it with their distributor partners, whether that's product data or customer transaction data, primarily out of competitive reasons, and that's understandable. But there does seem to be growing momentum for increased data sharing and increased collaboration so that both sides win here. So Victor, continuing with you, can you share some insight on this dynamic, on if we're likely to see further increased data sharing, perhaps out of necessity to meet and exceed buyer expectations?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we have to, right? The need for information is there. And like I said, these generations are so used to having information just at their fingertips, right? In the past, we were okay with just sending a catalog and maybe some pictures for the webpage. And that was it. That was all the information that was shared. And we've come a long way. I mean, it started with e-commerce and sharing information. Now the data has to be properly attributed, get all the tags in there. all the information that an AI engine can then read it and give you an answer, right? As a manufacturers, we had libraries of documents and information that was actually not confidential, right? There's selection guides and data sheets, but they were just sitting in a cloud or back in the day in somebody's hard drive, but not being shared. So we at Siemens, we acknowledge this, and we are creating platforms that will share all this knowledge and all this information so that any customer, any distributor can get access to all of this information, especially with the use of AI, right? So now you don't have to go look at websites or catalogs, just ask a question and get your answer, right? Because that's kind of where it's going to be, right? So if the data is not ready or you're not ready to share it, you're just going to be left behind.
Ali, over to you. Thoughts on data or information sharing?
Yeah, I would say one of the organizations I was with in the past, I mean, we felt the pain when manufacturers withheld product and customer data. It slowed down quoting and hurt credibility with customers. I would say my last organization, we did a better job of aligning with manufacturers on clean product content and I'll say transactional transparency. It helped us compress, quote cycle times and obviously improve margins. So, my view is this, the future is about shared intent fabrics. Manufacturers have got to do a good job providing clean product and pricing data. Distributors have got to be able to provide, customer and transaction data, and then we've got to have AI be able to really stitch it, together. Data hoarded is data wasted, and the next gen buyer doesn't care, where the data is coming from. They just care about how fast and how accurate the answer is.
And David, David, any thoughts on this information sharing between manufacturers and distributors in order to meet these buyer expectations?
I think, there's two layers at which it's really important. Number one is around product and attribute. That's just part of the whole search experience that I can tell you, having now onboarded tons and tons of distributors and manufacturers, we actually benchmark them against each other to see how effectively they do that. And we offer that as a service to help people understand where are the content gaps that are blocking buyers from actually getting to the information they need. So being able to really take a fresh look at that, I think a lot of people became cynical about e-commerce and they took their foot off the gas pedal because of the single digit trail of tears problem I talked about earlier. The second is really around market data. And one of the things that a good platform provides for you is helping you to understand how responsive are your CSRs to quote requests. How does your pricing compare? What % of the time are you losing an order because your price was too high versus you're out of stock versus your branches are in the wrong location? I mean, all of those market data that accumulate on a platform are super important to helping companies be able to optimize their operations and to be the winners in this great reshuffling that we're talking about.
Well, just one last reminder out there that feel free to submit a question at any time and we'll try to tackle it. Coming down the home stretch here, I want to get to where is all this headed? We kind of alluded to some, trends, the way that this whole demographic is shifting. But I do want to ask, where is this heading? Given how fast expectations have been changing and how fast technology is changing to keep up with it, I feel like 2 years is about the maximum anyone can try and project here. Anything beyond that is just guesswork. So let's get our panel's thoughts on what this buyer expectation and how to cater to it, what the situation might be 2 years from now. Will buyer expectations continue to be about the same? Will distributors and manufacturers close that gap, or will it continue to widen? So David, any thoughts here on kind of what we're expecting over the next couple of years?
I see it as the separation of winners from losers in the whole thing. There's going to be people who sit on their hands and either deny that this is going on or say we're going to wait until it sorts out. And we're seeing that right now. Honestly, there's people whose heads aren't really even in the game today. And it's not going to be so much what happens on platforms that changes. I mean, that part of it, there's going to be a progressive build out of capabilities and value add. What's going to change the most is going to be the way that winners behave differently from losers. And that to me is the part that I can confidently predict, is that there will be a reshuffling of market share depending on how well people engage and address this demographic shift that's going on.
Sure. Ali, your thoughts here?
Yeah, my decades of experience in distribution has taught me one thing. Distributors tend to lag buyer expectations. So, my view is the gap is widening, not shrinking. So 2 years out, my thought is buyers are going to want, response time in minutes. They're going to want a seamless digital and human, omni-channel experience. And David alluded to this. I mean, to me, ties back to winners and losers. To me, the winners won't be the biggest distributors or smallest. They'll be the fastest to adapt. So if you don't design a human-led omni-channel model, you're just not going to fall behind, but you're going to bleed market share faster to competitors. So in this new game, size that doesn't protect you, it's speed and design.
That's great. Victor, your thoughts on just where this is heading?
Yeah, I mean, I think both Mike and Dave and Ali, you made very good comments. And I think expectations will continue to be very high. And as manufacturers, we have to do just a conscious effort of helping our distributors bridge that gap, right? Like Ali said, distributors are usually lagging, right? I guess being agile and innovative, it's not been a description of the electrical industry in the past, right? We've been out there for hundreds of years, and it's been kind of a slow-moving industry, but we have to get there. And I've seen in the last few years how the industry is changing, is progressing, and manufacturers, we have to keep up and we have to push everybody along, right? And be ready, because then the winners are not going to be those that wait and see, right? Like David mentioned.
And I think the pandemic taught us that this industry, industrial distribution and manufacturing, it has been viewed as slow moving, very hard to adjust to change. But I think the pandemic showed us that it can be nimble when it's absolutely forced to be. So I think distributors are more agile than they might give themselves credit for. It sometimes takes lighting a fire under them to really get them moving. So then our final planned question here is, I think as with any best practices and thought leadership discussion, is the biggest question that our audience always asks or demands or looks for insight on is, how do I get started? What's that first step for a distributor or manufacturer executive watching this? I think they might be curious, what is something that they can do next week or next month to just start to get the ball rolling on this and getting their selling organization to be better at providing a buying experience that modern customers now expect. So it's kind of a big question there, but Ali, do you want to try to tackle that one on what's a key takeaway that they can start with, that low-hanging fruit that we all talk about to get going?
Yeah, I mean, look, you've got to be honest with yourself and really acknowledge and expose the coverage gap. Growth stalls when accounts are underserved, cycle times lag, cost to service misaligned, and you can't fix what you don't measure. So you got to start surfacing where the leakage actually is. Number two is, start thinking about how do you redesign the coverage model? How do you set up a focused effort of designing sellers to focus on the right size accounts, and having, if you've got an inside sales team that's reactive, how do you turn them into a proactive engine focusing on outbound calls and really, adequately servicing some of those small to medium sized accounts that need that coverage? You've got to put, ROI on the scoreboard, instrument it, measure it, take a look to see what kind of success you're seeing. And then finally, you've got to layer in AI for scale. Once the team, I think, executes consistently, you're going to be able to keep optimizing that machine. And, my last comment is you don't future-proof by hoping for perfection. You've got to do it by understanding the current state, redesigning the coverage, and really obviously enforcing discipline.
And then over to Victor, just the same thing. Where is a great place to start for this? Looking for that just initial first step.
Yeah, and the way I see it, it's a mindset shift or change, right? You have to understand the environment and where we're in, and I mean, David has given all these data of the shift of the buyer behavior. So start with a mind shift, and then bringing that into your organization and change the culture, right? And of agile and adaptability. And the reality is there's already a lot of companies or just solutions out there in the market that can help you get there, right? So you don't have to figure it all out yourself, like companies like TradeHounds, right? That they're allowing us to go address this need without us having to figure it all out, right? And there's others through AI, and there's others in different industries. So I think understanding that you can partner with other companies in this journey and get there faster, but it starts with you changing that mindset that, hey, something has to be done. I need to be faster. I need to be agile. And how do I get there faster? It's probably using resources that are out of your reach, right?
David, same thing. Any advice on the first step? Key takeaway here.
Well, start with the North Star. The North Star is buyers. And, honestly, you need to know your buyers really well now. And you need to get much more granular in terms of generationally, what are their expectations? In practical terms, when we work with folks at Trade Hounds, there's a few simple steps that anybody could do this afternoon. In fact, is setting up your brand account on the app, making it visible, helping people to know what are the products that you sell. If you have branches, making sure your branches are listed and you have the line cards attached to them. Those are baby steps, but as I said, it's really about getting your head in the game. And it's also about having somebody internally who's responsible for leading this omni-channel buyer-centric approach. And if you don't have somebody assigned to it, you're probably not going to take it seriously. And I think for every board that's out there, this is a board level issue of how are we going to make sure we don't lose in the reshuffling of Gen Z.
Before we close out here, we did get one last question that I want to address here. Henry asks, is there a differentiation in this evolution when comparing distribution of a more simple product? They give an example of an electrical breaker compared to a much more heavily involved, customized industrial HVAC unit. Very different selling equations involved there. Just any broad thoughts that you have there on how this affects more simple products versus those multi-component products. Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I could take that one. That it goes back to ambiguous, new, complex, or risky criteria that I used earlier. So anytime you have those criteria, that means it's less prone to being just pushed through a platform, right? There's conversations that are needed. There are risks that have to be identified and mitigated. And so I think in that case, it's more about building awareness and preference than it is about transacting. And the revenues are going to come in more of a downstream traditional channel type of way.
All right. Well, that really is all the time we had here for our discussion today. So that wraps up this discussion on evolving buyer expectations. Victor, David, Ali, really want to thank you for lending your time and expertise to this event. I think you provided a lot of insights and best practices and practical examples for our audience to think about. And your different perspectives here really allowed us to attack this topic from multiple angles. But before we sign off, I do want to give you each a chance to share any quick final thoughts or words of advice for our audience to leave with. Victor, do you want to share anything to parting words?
No, just appreciate the time and the invitation. It was a great conversation. I think just sparks and motivates us to be agile and be aware, right, of the trends. So thank you all for the invitation at the time.
Ali, over to you.
Yeah, no, it's been great to be part of the discussion. I want to thank all of you, that joined the call. Mike and David, Victor, really great collaborating with all you. The real work right now is now turning these insights into execution. So that's all I got to add. But really excited to be part of the discussion and look forward to supporting anybody however I can.
And David, final thoughts.
Yeah, I just want to thank MDM and NAW as well as Victor and Ali for bringing a really important topic to the fore. And the buyer shift is real and their expectation shift is real. And I think this is really just the start of a much longer conversation around how distribution and their manufacturer partners need to pivot in order to succeed. So just want to thank everybody for attending today and all the effort that went into it.
Well, just like David said, of course, I want to thank everyone in the audience who attended this program, whether you watched it live or on demand. I certainly want to thank Trade Hounds for its sponsorship of this program and everything that they do to help distributors meet and exceed buyer expectations. Like I mentioned in the intro, we will send an on-demand recording link of this webinar to all registrants, so expect to see that in your inbox. So thanks again all around. I hope you learned or gained some valuable insight from this webcast. And that concludes our program. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.